Hello everyone, and today I'd like to do a short video explaining the importance of proper nutrition. And nutrition it can impact your brain, it can make you think sharper, it has effects on your mood. So the foods that I'm going to share today are those that are generally, helpful when it comes to boosting brain power and also reducing anxiety levels, which are so important in this time of the pandemic. And a lot of people have anxiety issues that are directly related with the food consumptions or with the foods that they consumed. And so what I'd like to do in this video is I'd like to kind of pile up all of the research and all of the books that I've read on nutrition, which is like dozens of books, and kind of taking some of the best books I thought on it and compiling that information to give you towards the end of this video the 10 top foods that I think would help anybody perform better in any area of life and really boost their brain power, as well as just be beneficial for your mood, for reducing anxiety, and just for feeling better, for feeling happier. And on top of that, even more important, I will tell you what foods to eliminate from your diet, because sometimes it's more important to remove the toxins than to even add the beneficial things. So yes, I will give you these beneficial brain boosting foods that are, by the way, if something is good for your brain, it's usually good for your entire body because our brain controls everything. And I will also tell you what foods to eliminate to improve your mental performance, to have more energy and vitality, just to feel sharper, to get a mitochondrial boost. So stay towards the end because I've compiled many books. Some of my favorite ones, I really liked Eat Smarter by Sean Stevenson. I liked Genius Foods by Max Lugavere, and amongst others. And I want to just discuss what I've learned. So what we eat actually makes our brain. And actually this is really interesting, but Sean Stevenson points out that even though our brains are only 2% of our mass, they actually consume around 25% of our calories. So they're like these hungry organs. So they're very complex entities because they're very powerful, delicate, and protective. As you know, our brains have these external barrier, which is the cranium, but they also have this internal protection system called the blood-brain barrier, the BBB, as I like to call it, the blood-brain barrier. And the BBB is what determines what substances are going to cross to the brain. So they're very selective. So they're very powerful, delicate, and add selective to it because they determine what substances get to the brain, and also they eliminate and clear the waste products and all the toxins. And so actually this is pretty interesting, but most of that detoxification actually happens when you sleep. So our brain has this lymphatic system called the glymphatic system, which actually removes all the waste products, and it's implicated in reducing the risk for you getting Alzheimer's and dementia, because what the glymphatic system does is it helps to clear the beta amyloid plaques from your brain. That happens in the restorative sleep. So one of the best ways to keep your brain sharp is to sleep better during the night and get restorative sleep. But I already made a video on sleeping. So I want to talk more about nutrition in this video. But just know, it's not only about your food that you eat. You have to exercise properly, you have to sleep well, and you have to reduce your stress levels. Stress management is huge, and just finding optimism. And as I talk about top foods, it's not only what you eat, but also how you eat and when you eat. And I'll talk about those things as well, because I think they're equally as important. So actually some nutrients cross our blood-brain barrier directly. And literally they feed our brain. They provide them the nutrients that they need so their brains are better and smarter. And I want to give you the foods that actually can cross the blood-brain barrier, and it's amazing, and that can make you feel better. So I'll give you both some nutrients that Sean Stevenson recommends and some foods for the brain that people like Jim Quick, that Max Lugavere, and some amazing other people recommend for the brain, just because of the amount of nutrients and fatty acids that these foods have, like the omegas. I'll talk all about that. And so again, our brains are very selective, and they also clear waste, and sleep is very important for that. Now let's look at something interesting. There's this concept called neuroinflammation, and there's this thing called the calorie paradigm, and our body actually uses different calories differently. And people think, well, fat will make us fat because fat has like 9 calories versus carbs and proteins have 4. So fats have 9 versus 4, so therefore fats will make us fat. Well, it's not that. A calorie does not equal a calorie. And I really want to bring this point home. And Mark Hyman has an excellent book called Eat Fat to Get Thin, amongst other amazing books. But a calorie is actually not really a calorie. It doesn't mean that if you eat more calories, you're going to gain fat. In fact, carbs have been shown to cause us to store the fat. And so let me tell you the first villain. And this should not be a surprise that sugar is a villain, right? It's not good for our health. So what happens when you eat sugar, these calories, because of something called metabolic flexibility, our body uses the calories from sugar to store fat. So the more carbs you eat, the bigger your waistline will become. And that's directly proportional to the size of your brain. So the more carbs you eat, your brain actually shrinks. So the size of the brain actually decreases. Because what carbs do, they cause something called neuroinflammation. And this neuroinflammation, especially in the hypothalamus, and John Stevenson mentions this, we have this hypothalamic axis made of the hypothalamus, thyroid, thymus, etc. And what we get is we literally get inflammation in our hypothalamus, and that causes something called leptin resistance. And this leptin resistance increases the cravings in our body, and so we crave more food, and the food we crave are usually some of the starchy, unhealthy type of food. And so that's what literally leads to weight gain. And so our brain has a lot of sugar pathways, and it literally loves glucose. In fact, 50 to 80% of glucose is literally snatched by our brains. And so evolutionarily, it doesn't make sense. Our ancestors would never eat that much. It just, we're eating such an excess amount right now, and our brain is like, I'll take it because it can use it as a fuel. So it's like, okay, I'll take it. But that doesn't mean it's good for you. So I wish it was, because since industrialization 100 years ago, our sugar consumption, specifically white sugar, increased from 5 pounds to literally 150 pounds a year. Now that's crazy. And before, we consumed that mainly as fruits, which also have fiber, so they're not nearly as bad. But now it mainly comes from refined carbohydrates. And so that's the number one thing to eliminate, sugar, because that literally causes inflammation in our brain. It literally shrinks the size of our brain and causes leptin resistance. Leptin is our satiety hormone. So by reducing the ability of leptin to function properly, we actually get more cravings. Our appetite increases. We want more food. And this is usually not the healthiest foods that we're craving. And so you get a vicious cycle. You eat more bad food and then you get more inflammation. And so this evolutionary drive, this is so faulty because we have so much access to sugar right now. So we literally consume, as I mentioned, over 100 pounds a year. And this sugar that we consume is not natural. And as I mentioned, there's different forms of sugar. There's honey, there's maple syrup, there's stevia, there's monk fruit. These are natural forms. Now, whether a certain form of sugar is good for you or not, I cannot tell you that. I can tell you that refined carbs like white sugar is not good for our health, as I just mentioned. So please eliminate that. It's a kryptonite food. You don't want to consume that. So the number one tip that I'm going to provide you is the first food to eliminate, and that's sugar, especially if you want to perform better throughout the day. And so just that awareness. If you want to have a bit of honey or a bit of natural sweetener, by all means, by just being aware how your body feels after you do that. I'm not telling you not to consume it, but I'm saying definitely go natural if you choose that path. But even then, I would say in moderation and seeing how your body feels. But so the number one tip is avoid any unnatural process like white sugar or any other, not not only white, but things like Splenda, any artificial sweetener. Okay, now that you know the effects, and this is really really important. You have to trust your intuition and just know how your body feels. And I also recommend you to remove any other refined carbohydrates. And there's this really interesting study as I find my notes here, and David Ludwig actually did a great experiment between fast-acting carbs and slow-acting carbs. And what he found is that the fMRI in the brain literally lighted up for the fast-acting carbs. So the fast-acting are like your refined sugar. The slow-acting are like your sweet potatoes, your butternut squash, those kinds. The healthier versions, right? And so when people ate the fast-acting, the part of the brain called the nucleus accumbens, which is the same part that lights up when people take drugs, lights up in the brain. And so you literally crave more. And so sugar is pretty much like an addiction. And so I highly recommend to, and this is a PhD from Harvard, and so highly recommend to avoid that as much as possible. Okay, remember, calorie does not equal calorie because our body has these metabolic switches, okay? Other foods to eliminate are flour. Again, we never had this white flour since the Industrial Revolution. Our consumption went up so much more, and wheat as well. Now, literally 66% of our food come, like 2/3 come from refined carbs. So things like soy, corn, wheat, and grains and flour. So we're just huge. So eliminate anything that's literally processed. Sugar and flour are just no-nos. You want to feel better, you want to think sharper, you want to perform better. No sugar, at least no refined sugar. Natural sugar, I like a bit of honey personally, but again, I can't give you the right answer. You have to look what works for you. I say in moderation for sure, and avoiding flour. So I'm going to give you amazing foods which you can choose. I'll give you a lot of variety, but actually this is even more important. You want to remove the toxins. So no sugar and no flour, because actually the removal of these can do people way more benefits than the amazing foods which I will tell you in just a moment. So the removal is more important than addition, and that's a big concept that I want to emphasize. Okay, so the second thing that I want you to remove are vegetable oils. And vegetable oils include things like canola oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil. Did you know that literally 20% of our calories come from soybean oil? This never existed in before industrialization. Literally in the last 150 years, our consumption increased. You look at every product around you, it has soybean oil. Well, this is terrible. Eliminate vegetable and seed oils. And I'll tell you why. These vegetable and seed oils have a high ratio of omega-6 to omega-3. Omega-6 oils are inflammatory, so they cause inflammation. And omega-3 oils are anti-inflammatory, so they remove inflammation. Now, I'm not saying inflammation is the devil. It does tend to lead to chronic disease, but that's only when that ratio is out of balance. So before industrialization, the ratio was around 1:1. So we had a 1:1 ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. Now, it's more like 16:1. So the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 is 16:1. Thanks to soybean oil, 20% of our diet, 20% of our calories. It's crazy. The oils that you want to be focusing are oils that we ate for many, many years. Things like olive oil. In fact, extra virgin olive oil is the best because you get it from the first press. So things like extra virgin olive oil, and make sure you don't heat it too much because the best when it's not heated. So things like extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil, coconut oil, MCT oil, my favorite, God bless, MCT oil. Those are good oils. Those are great for your brain. Avoid these high omega-6 vegetable and seed oil. There is one exception of seed oil. I sometimes tend to have flaxseed oil, and flaxseed oil has a very good ratio of omega-3 to omega-6. So I would do that of an exception when I talk about vegetable and flaxseed oils, but it's up to you how you want to go with that. Okay, so step one would be to avoid sugars and refined foods, artificial sweeteners, flours, and step two is to literally reduce your vegetable oils, okay, and most seed oils, like sunflower seed oil, for example. And the third last thing to eliminate is factory raised products. So factory farmed meat, for example. That's not good for your health, and that's also not sustainable for the environment, for the planet. So it's a lose-lose situation. No, you want to get wild-caught or grass-fed. So you want to get grass-fed beef or grass-fed meat. I think meat is probably the healthiest product out there. I know a lot of people are for high plant, and I think that's absolutely right. But I also think it's the type of meat that you consume. This factory meat is high in omega-6. Again, same reason why vegetable oils are bad. And it's very pro-inflammatory. Versus grass-fed, which is much, much better for you. And it has so much good nutrients, like things like, choline and creatine, right? They're amazing, right? That's what you want to focus. You want to focus on grass-fed, nothing that's factory. I think Michael Pollan has a quote: "If it's a plant, it's good for you. If it's made in a plant, not so good for you." So, avoid anything processed. Avoid farmed meats. You want to eat grass-fed meat. That's a really, really good source of protein. As well as my favorites, wild-caught fish, sockeye salmon is amazing. It's very low in mercury, and it's also just so amazing because it has zeaxanthin, which is very good for your vision. And also pasture-raised eggs. I like that for protein as well as a bit of beans and lentils, but you have to test how those work for you. I would go with animal proteins, to be honest, just because of the anti-nutrients that are found. You can read a lot. Stephen Gundry, I love that guy. He talks a lot about that. But I make sure to buy the Eden brand beans, which are already pressure cooked, and so they remove all the anti-nutrients. Regardless, how you get your proteins, avoid factory farmed meats. So those are the three villains that I want everybody to eliminate. I'm just going to repeat them. No sugar, no artificial sweeteners, no flour, right? The second is no vegetable oils. Go for olive oil, so much better. Go for coconut oil. Go for avocado oil, as a healthy source of fat. Nuts and seeds, they're good. Avocados are my favorite. Even just olives, I love olives. And then eliminate these unhealthy meats, right? These industrialized, you want to aim for grass-fed. And so these are the main things that I want you to eliminate. In the next video, I'll talk to you about foods that I want you to add. I know these foods, this video is taking a long time, but to reduce inflammation and to literally make your brain cells grow more, I'll talk about the foods that you want to eat. Clearly, the three that I mentioned are not helping. If you want to feel better, think smarter, think better, be able to focus, have a sharper brain, and just feel a lot better and have a lot more energy, then these three just gotta go.